It is now my distinct honor to introduce you to tonight's keynote speaker and my personal friend, John Samuel. John is the co-founder and CEO of ABLR. There, he focuses on helping organizations remove barriers for people with disabilities who want access to education, retail, entertainment, and employment. John's passion for his work is very personal, as he is blind and wants to make sure the obstacles he has faced are removed for others. Over the past 16 years, John has held leadership roles both domestically and internationally. While launching and serving as CEO for Aster Cameroon, he built a $45 million business to bring internet access across Africa. Afterward, he became an early member of Homestrings, a crowdfunding platform where he helped raise capital for startups in emerging markets. John holds his MBA from George Washington University and a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from NC State, go Pack. John is also an International Association of Accessibility Professionals, certified professional in accessibility core competencies, and holds a certificate in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace from the University of South Florida. John was recognized in 2021 for his work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and received the Triangle Business Journal's Leader in Diversity Award. Other of his many awards include being named Triangle Business Journal's 40 Under 40 and the Business Journal's Influencers Rising Stars, a national list of 100 young influential business leaders. John is also an angel investor in 321 Coffee, a company whose mission is to provide employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. He also serves on the board of directors of Aravind Eye Foundation, the world's largest eye care provider, and the United Arts Council of Raleigh and Wake County. Whew, I'm getting tired just reading this. John is married to Nicole Samuel, who he met in business school, and they have 2 sons, Eli and Ethan. They live in Cary, North Carolina, which is John's hometown, and the same place he never thought anyone who is blind could ever live. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, John Samuel.
Test, test. Hi, this area, and if I go too far this way, that's where you need to tell me. Just let me know, because that's the big issue. But, no, but thank you, Tina. It's very kind of you to have me here. I'm honored to be here at NC State again. But I have a couple questions I want to ask y'all. How many of you like attending networking events? And since I can't see you, I'm going to ask you to please clap or participate in any way you can. Okay, all right, that's good. And so how many of you actually think you're good at networking and meeting people? Well, I hated attending networking events, and I was terrible at meeting new people. You see, when before I had a cane, and I'd go to these events, I often would bump into tables and chairs, and people would think I was drunk. And then when I was just standing still, people thought I was a jerk because I didn't smile at them or shake hands with them. So when I did get a cane, I thought everything was going to change. I thought, oh my gosh, people are going to be like, oh, he can't see, that's why he doesn't make eye contact. I'm going to come over and talk to him. Nope, that did not happen. It was the complete opposite. It was like this cane became this barrier that people didn't want to cross. And so, that issue I had wasn't the same for my colleagues who had guide dogs. And it was like, what's that guide dog doing? Is it making eye contact with people that they just want to come and talk to this dog? But, even though the dog is working, people could relate to this dog, and they would come and talk to the handler of the dog. And so I started wondering, I was like, I can't add eyes to my cane, but what can I do to make my cane more approachable so that I can have those authentic conversations that I craved? So I had an idea. How many of you remember an old TV show called Pimp My Ride? Yeah. All right. So Pimp My Ride, if you don't know, was a TV show in the early 2000s that was on MTV, and it was hosted by the rapper Exhibit. And Exhibit would come to your house, and he would grab your keys and take your beat-up old car and take it over to West Coast Customs, where they would pimp it out. And when I say pimp it out, I mean pimp it out. You know, they added like TVs, they added hot tubs. I even saw flamethrowers one time. It was amazing. And so, you know, I thought, what can I do to pimp my cane out? And I started thinking about what can I do? So I came up with this idea of doing pimp my cane, and we could do like a design competition. And that's where my friend Sharon, she's like, oh, my kids, I told them the idea. They thought that was cool, but they said pimp's no longer the word. Kids are saying drip. So it's like, drip is the new word. So I'm like, okay, I gotta get some drip. So we're gonna call this Drip My Cane. So in 2020, we launched a design competition called Drip My Cane, and we had designers from all over the world submit designs. And it was a success. And so actually, we did it again in 2021, and this is actually one of the designed canes that that came out. You know, it's from Brazil. It's amazing. But you know, today I'm standing up, so like that's the place for me. But I was working for the city of New York, providing financial education for city employees during the recession. And I was living paycheck to paycheck. But when I looked around at my friends, you know, they were on different career trajectories. Many of them were moving up in their company, they were going to grad school. And here I was working for the city, and I was starting to even have trouble seeing content on the computer screen. And I found this little Microsoft magnifying mouse that helped me do my job, but I just didn't see a real career ahead of me. And that's when I reconnected with a gentleman named Steve Clements, who I worked with in Bangalore, India. And he was now on the board of directors of a cell phone tower manufacturing company. And he wanted to start up operations in Cameroon, which is in West Central Africa. And when I heard about this, I had no idea where Cameroon was. I thought it was in the Caribbean. I was like, oh, I'm going there. That's going to be great. But, you know, when I did find out I was in West Central Africa, I did not know what to expect, but I knew I wanted to go there. I knew if I went there, it could separate me from other people. And so Steve knew I had some sort of eye condition, but he didn't know the extent of it. And he agreed, we'll do this. And then when I met with the investors of the company, when they found out that I couldn't see, they were like, we can't send you out there. And I pleaded with them. I said, just give me a chance. And so they said, we'll give you 6 months and we'll go our separate ways. And I said, fine. So I packed up my bags. I left Manhattan with a $20,000 investment to go and start a company from scratch in Cameroon. And over the next 14 months, that $20,000 turned into $12 million in revenue, $2.4 million in profit. And that same company said, you need to give us 6 months notice before you leave. But over the next 3 years, I spread that company across the continent. And even, you know, I had accomplished my business goal, and I had a personal goal. I wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, so I did that. And even though those two things are some major accomplishments, the biggest accomplishment I ever had was when I was able to read a book for the first time in nearly 5 years. That was when I first got my first iPad. And the accessibility features built in allowed me to zoom in and invert the colors. And that was game-changing for me. And now, with a track record of starting a successful business, climbing mountains, and being able to read, I thought I could go back to grad school like my friends. And I thought there's only 2 cities I could possibly live in, New York or Washington, D.C. And so I started reaching out to different business schools in those cities, and I got this canned response from everyone. Thank you so much for your interest in our university. You can find out more information online. And I was like, okay, that's great. But George Washington University actually sent me a letter from the MBA office. They said, our associate dean would like to talk to you. Here is a guy who barely got out of high school, failed out of college, and took 6.5 years to graduate, and I'm getting a dean wants to talk to me. And it was like the most amazing experience. And so I spoke with her, and she's like, I want you to come out and visit us and meet with my research assistants. So I did. And I was in DC, and it was amazing. It had great accessibility. There was a diverse population, and you know the folks that I met in the college were great. But I was like, I'm already here in DC. I'm going to go check out Georgetown. It's just a mile away. So I went over to their MBA office, and I walked in, and I said, hey, I just came in from Africa. I'd love to learn more about your program. And they said, oh, that's great. You can find everything online. I was like, all right, that's great. So I needless to say, I didn't apply, and I was like, I'm only going to apply to George Washington University because I didn't realize what a sense of belonging really meant until I was at my first orientation event at my MBA program. Because I was at an event where they had name cards where you're supposed to go sit, and I couldn't see where I was supposed to go, so I turned to the person next to me. And it happened to be the associate dean of the business school who had recruited me. But she had no idea I couldn't see because I never disclosed it. And she could empathize with what I was going through because she actually had a child with special needs. And she said, you got to be open about your vision loss with your classmates. And I often say that was the first time I could be my authentic self, and I could actually talk openly about who I was. And I was able to open up my heart, and I met my wife, Nicole, in the program. And although I was now open about my vision loss with my classmates and my peers, my friends, I still thought employers would see it as a liability, so I didn't disclose. And as my classmates were getting big offer letters and joining big companies, I was struggling to even just complete an online application because many of them just weren't accessible to me. And I can honestly say that brought me to tears more than once. But I eventually landed on my feet with an emerging market crowdfunding platform where we raised capital for startups in Africa, Eastern Europe, and other areas. But 3 years later, that company folded, and I was out of a job again. But this time I wasn't alone anymore. I now had a wife, I had a baby, and we had just built a house in DC. And if you have any of those three things, you know that's not cheap. And so the stress of it all started causing my sight to go even faster. And I could no longer see the computer screen, even using my inverted colors and using the magnification. And I thought my career was over. And that's when I heard about this software that was developed at SAS, the data science company. And they had designed this application to help people who are blind and low vision visualize graphs and charts using sounds. And I thought it was so cool. But the coolest thing about it was that it was designed by a gentleman named Ed Summers. And Ed Summers had the same eye condition to me and lived in my hometown of Cary, North Carolina, the same place I never thought anyone blind could ever live. And up until that point, I had never met a blind person. I was like, I got to meet this guy. So I tried for months to get in touch with him, but no luck. Finally, my wife's like, well, if he can live in Cary, maybe we can too. So we found a house online, and we told my folks. My dad got so excited. My dad immediately jumps in the car to go look at this house. And as he's driving, he's talking to us. And he starts yelling at something. I'm like, what are you doing, Dad? He's like, oh, there's a blind guy on the road. Maybe it's the guy you're trying to get in touch with. Dad, please don't yell at blind people on the road. And he's like, all right, gets out of the car and walks over to this poor guy. And he goes, you Ed Summers? And the guy says, yes, I am. My dad puts the phone in this poor guy's ear, and after apologizing profusely, he agreed to meet me. And I came down that next weekend, and a 30-minute conversation turned to 3 hours, and Ed introduced me to the world of accessibility. But more importantly, he showed me that my career wasn't over and that my dreams of being an executive weren't dead. And so Ed gave me a couple pieces of advice. He's like, if you want to continue your career trajectory, you're going to have to learn as a blind person. And you're going to have to start opening up about your disability and talk to employers about it. There's all these DEI programs around. You should reach out to them. So over the next couple months, I started training myself on how to use a screen reader, the assistive technology that blind individuals use to navigate digital content. And then I started reaching out to any organization in the Triangle. This is in 2017. Any organization that had a DEI program, I started reaching out. But not a single organization got back to me. And I started thinking, if I can't find a job with my education, my experience, and my privilege, what about other people who are blind? And that's when Ed introduced me to the president of LCI, at the time, Jeffrey Hotting. And LCI happens to be the largest employer of people who are blind in the country, and they're located just 7 miles from where I grew up in RTP. And they're a manufacturing company and retail and distribution. I was meeting with Jeffrey, and all he was talking about was, how can we create tech jobs for people who are blind and upper mobility? So I ended up joining LCI, tasked with that. Create a new business that will create upper mobility for people who are blind in tech. And so that is the origins of ABLR, which is now ABLR. And so when I realized there's a couple things we had to do. If we wanted to accomplish that goal, based on my own lived experiences, there's a few things we had to do. First, we had to eliminate the digital divide, which meant we had to launch a digital accessibility business that would help remove the barriers that people with disabilities face when trying to access education and employment. We had to change the mindsets of people and organizations. That meant we had to create a disability inclusion training to help change the mindsets of hiring managers to understand why and how they can employ people with disabilities and tap into a talent source that is natural problem solvers. And then we had to create pathways for employment, to create, a training program to help get people with disabilities trained up in the job skills that they needed and help build a sense of confidence for them. And so it's almost exactly 5 years to the date that I joined LCI. I joined on September 18th, 2017. And it was slow. Those first couple years were just ridiculously slow. But the last 2 years have been anything but. It's been a rocket ship. We've added 70 new clients in our digital accessibility practice over the last 2 years, most recently the Carolina Hurricanes this week. We actually just completed a pilot program with the North Carolina Community College Systems Office to get our disability inclusion training program rolled out to their faculty and employers so that people with disabilities going to the community college systems now have people who can understand their challenges. And then the thing I'm most proud of and excited about is that this month we launched our workforce development program in collaboration with the North Carolina Division of Services for the Blind to launch a workforce development program to get people who are blind trained to become digital accessibility testers and start a career in tech. These are just, some of the exciting accomplishments. And I'm so proud of them and my team. But what I'm really here today is to challenge you all to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, to remove the barriers that are stopping you from helping others to open doors. Because if you do that, you just might find your own drip. So thank you all.
Thank you so much for that talk. I'm Ray Levy. I said hey to you a little while ago. I'm head of the Data Science Academy at NC State.
Yes.
And we are trying so hard to think about how to make everything we do accessible. And so one of the things we've been playing around with is PowerPoint and the accessibility, so-called maybe, accessibility features in PowerPoint. And it's been interesting to use that with slides that have graphics and try to add the alt text. I'd just love to get your thoughts on that and sort of what are some of the first steps you would want people to do, like if they're passing you a set of PowerPoint slides to make them more accessible for you with the screen reader. If you would indulge us in that information, I would really appreciate it.
No, that's a wonderful question, because when I was finishing up my MBA and I was struggling to see, Excel and PowerPoint, that's like MBA go-tos. And I struggled. I really struggled with it. And even as a screen reader, I've only been using a screen reader for 5 years. And although I've found comfort in Excel, I still struggle with PowerPoint. And so sometimes I will even just convert it to PDF, and then it gets even more complicated, and it's like, oh gosh. But I think that, being able to add, first being intentional is the first thing, and I think you're doing the right step. The other piece is, so there is an accessibility checker running that through there. And then I think, at least for my own self, my team now is learning how to get me to look at PowerPoints. Otherwise, I'd say, just tell me what it says. And I think that what we're doing is they're putting into, when there are slides, we're turning it to a Word file for me. So we use the rich text, because it's easier for me to navigate through the Word file. And that's just me, because I'm not a power user. And I think that's an assumption that a lot of people think is that, oh, you're a screen reader user, you must be a power user. I'm not a power user. I am somebody who knows how to get by. And, but having that in a Word file for me makes a world of difference, because I can navigate easier, quicker. And then adding in the description. And I know that adds an extra step, but when you do know that there's a student or somebody out there who needs that, knowing that you've taken that extra step gives that whole new level of sense of belonging. And it's very appreciated. So thank you for that.
Hi, is there an economic barrier between, say, a company like SAS and a small mom and pop or smaller business in terms of having the resources to accommodate and train and have the resources available to hire someone like you? And it seems like there would be, like, I have no trouble seeing SAS having that money to do that, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunities in small businesses and growing business that I would see may not have the funds to be able to hire someone like you because they can't give you the proper tools you need to be successful. Is that out there, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. There's misconceptions about the cost of accommodations, and I believe it's over 50% are less than $500, right? So when you think about that, under $500 for accommodations, but a lot of people are like, oh, we can't hire or we can't work with people with disabilities because of that cost barrier. But we're working with the state, with the Division of Services for the Blind, the NC Vocational Rehab. The state is there. They have a lot of resources to be able to help organizations become more accessible and accommodating for people with disabilities. Again, I think it's the lack of knowledge of what resources are out there. And we try from our own services, our organization, yes, we work with a lot of larger companies, but we got our start working with the arts, who had very little money to actually get accessibility. But because of their intentionality, we were able to find workarounds. And so I think with small businesses, I think with the demand for talent right now, there's a lot of talent out there who with disabilities that would do really well in small businesses. And I think that working with the vocational rehab, Division of Services for the Blind, they would be able to help accommodate and really kind of break down those misconceived barriers. And even with our organization, we even have small business packages because we want everyone to be accessible and attainable. And so I think if you really look into it, there's opportunities.
Hi, John. I'm Rebecca Sitton. I'm the IT Accessibility Coordinator on campus and the Assistive Technology Provider. So I'm glad you're here tonight. And I also want to make sure the room knows that I'm here tonight as your resource on campus for learning how to build and make accessible PowerPoints and accessible technology on campus, and make sure that the software and different educational elements you're using are accessible. I appreciate and love that you are using Division of Services for the Blind to develop a group of individuals that can test the digital environment, because we have an automated checker.
Yep.
And I do manual testing for accessibility on campus, but I know not everybody has that skill. And I really, really, really appreciate the work you do. And I love Ed Summers, and I've worked with him many, many years now. So I just want to make that announcement in the room that you can always email accessibility@ncsu.edu,
Yep.
and we can answer your questions and find you assistance.
That's wonderful. Because I remember Crystal used to be here, I think, many years ago. Yeah, so Crystal was a dear friend, and she actually joined when I joined at LCI at that time. And, I think you're all using Pope Tech, the automated tester. And, we work with Pope Tech quite a bit. But a lot of people think that the automated solutions are the only solution. But I'm so happy you're doing manual testing, because unless you actually have manual testing, things can be accessible, but they may not be usable. And that's something you've always got to be considerate about, is to make sure that, you may feel like you've checked the box with being accessible, but, going that extra step to make sure that's usable is critically important.
Definitely want to say thank you and ask, during your time at NC State, for our faculty, our student services professionals in the room, what could we have done, and what can we do to better support folks who are in need, who may not feel comfortable saying anything?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've reflected on it quite a bit over the last couple years, because when I was a student, I had made the decision when I went through the continuing education program. I remember filling out my document, and there was a document, there was a checkbox that says, have you ever been academically suspended from another institution? And I did not check it. And when I didn't check that, I was so scared that a professor or somebody else would find out. So even though I wasn't able to see, I was leaving class at 4 o'clock because I had to leave before sunset, because I had to get home. And so I never told professors. Professors, they were like, this guy doesn't stay for a whole class. He leaves in the middle of test. And there was a fear of being outed. And there was this fear, I was, the only time I heard about accommodations was that during the syllabus review. If they did, it was like during the first day of class, they go through the syllabus. If you need any accommodations, disability services. That was all I heard, one time. But I feel like if there's a constant reminder of letting students know, because I don't, and as you know, young people and anybody, nobody wants to feel like that one person. We all want to have this sense of belonging. And so I never wanted to, rock the boat. And so I never told anyone. I was scared. And I think there's a lot of people out there who just don't know what's available, and they just don't want to be seen as different. And I think that, understanding, kind of talking about it more openly and having those discussions with students to say if there's any accommodations. And again, leading with when you're making those, talking about it, lead with an understanding that people may be uncomfortable talking about it. And I think if you're intentional about making sure that students know what's available, what resources, I think that's the first step.
Thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story with us. And from a corporate world perspective, and also from a Latin American perspective, I would like to go into 2 different questions, comments area. The first one is, it seems to me that the diversity of disabilities is huge. So as a company, as a startup, when you go to training in a class, how do you address that? Do you accommodate as it comes, trying to see what kind of talent comes in and then you adapt? Or maybe in your experience, when you were talking about creating tools for upper mobility issues, how do you choose? Do you go with the numbers? There's more people with this disability than that one, and how do you prepare? It almost seems, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but it seems that we are firefighting rather than paving the parking lot for disability.
Yeah. No, if I understand it properly, I think, when we think about accessibility and disability inclusion, it's almost like accessibility benefits everybody. And so if we think about the lowest case, like if we can make it work for this individual, it'll help everybody. We often talk about certain, physical attributes like curb cuts, right? Curb cuts were designed for people using wheelchairs. But how many people benefit from a curb cut? And so when we think about it from that way, if we can create accessible experiences for individuals with disabilities, it can benefit everyone. And so, but you're right, disability community is probably it's the most diverse community out there, right? We'll take anybody at any age. We're the most inclusive, we'll take you. But, when we do think about the intersectionality of disability and let's say race, for instance, it's very interesting. One thing that and I thought this may kind of go off the track on your question, but one of the things that when I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, culturally, from an Asian perspective, it was almost taboo. Don't talk about it. Don't disclose this. And so from that intersectionality aspect, it's very challenging because people in different cultures and they may not want to talk about it. And so we have to be very systematic about how do how do we make sure that people have that, again, going back to the disclosure, helping people disclose. And when we think about companies, it really goes back to what we're really now working on is employee journey mapping. So taking that entire employee journey map from recruitment all the way to retirement and thinking about it rather than firefighting, like, oh, we have this person who needs this accommodation right now. Forget that. Let's start back let's think about the whole process. So if we think about our recruitment process and we make sure that it's accessible for people with disabilities, it will benefit other people in every aspect. And so that goes from recruitment, that goes to onboarding, that goes to hiring, that goes, the whole gamut. But I think we need to really take a step back and rethink about our employee journey mapping and our customer journey mapping, and rather than tackling the issues at hand. But hopefully that answers that question.
Hello, my name is Caroline Miranda, and I'm a first-year student at NC State. So, and I just had a question. What advice or tactics did you have or use to change the mindsets of the people, like in the organizations and communities, especially specifically what sort of advice for communities or organizations that we ourselves find ourselves in? I hope that everybody in this room believes that we need to have better accessibility. I mean, that's why you're here. But how do we help to get others in this room and talking about this? And because I see this even between students and that kind of thing of oh, I don't want to have to go to this diversity class or something like that just because it's just not something that they want to do or are very stuck in a way that need to be. I don't know. How do we change that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I believe people inherently want to do the right thing. They don't want to exclude people on purpose. But I think that often something I talk about is proximity builds empathy. The more time that we can talk about it, have conversations, and be able to, this way I hope that you humanize what that experience of somebody with a disability is by hearing my story. And that now when you're building PowerPoints or you're building documentation or you're thinking about that syllabus and only talking about accommodations one day of the year, I hope that from my own experiences that you can do that. And I think having more of those type of conversations. I'll even use the example. Coming into the Tally Center, my Uber driver dropped me off kind of somewhere else. And then I couldn't find where I was. He's like, oh, the Tally Center's right here. I got out. I was not next to the Tally Center. And I just started kind of saying, excuse me, anybody, and somebody came. And he wasn't a student. He was just working out in the area. And he walked me all the way here. And so, I don't think he's ever walked somebody before, kind of guided that. But I hope he now has a new level of understanding, the understanding of challenges, seeing me trying to navigate into this building. I hope that when I came in, there were some French students, and they were shocked by me coming in and asking for help. I hope they have a different level. The person at the reception, that's where some training needs to be done. He gave me some directions, told me the wrong direction. Luckily, Jessica in the audience was there to help me. She found me walking around. And then Tina, my friend, she's learning how to do sighted guide. Those are the type of things. It's that proximity builds empathy. The more exposure, that we have is, I think will change those things. And we can't expect people to go to a class and learn everything. But the more that we can open up conversations, real authentic conversations, and having more people with disabilities, being out and open, making sure that it is accessible for people to participate in events, that's how we're going to change things.
Thank you. I'm a professor here, and I am working very hard at making all of my course content available for screen readers, but I have a difficult time with equations.
Yes.
And chemicals,
Yeah.
chemical structures, and I didn't know if you knew of any groups that were working with the more difficult things that you could refer us to.
Yeah, I will look into that. I met a couple people previously who were working with haptics, so feeling it with to be able to kind of, especially with the kind of the molecular structure, so you can feel the bonds and you can feel that. And there's some, but the equations, I know there's some people working on it, and that has been just, that is a serious issue, and that's why people like Ed Summers out there are amazingly smart, trying to make, mathematics and STEM careers available. But I will look into it, and I will touch base with Tina and the team and get you those resources. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Hello, again, this is Rebecca Sitton, the IT Accessibility Coordinator. We have a program on campus called Equatio that I'll be glad to help you and introduce you to that'll make accessible equations for you. So email accessibility@ncsu.edu.
There you go. That's good.
I have a little bit different problem in this case since I'm not a faculty member here at NC State. I'm actually a community college instructor. Theoretically, I'm retired. The biggest problem that we have with PowerPoint is its lack of real ability to understand equations, graphics, and a whole host of other things. And there's not any publicly available tools out there at this point that allow us to essentially overcome those problems. Another thing which is a common problem when I look across campuses, and I'm actually teaching on 2 different campuses, our learning management systems need to be substantially upgraded. They are not accessible for many of them.
Yeah.
And I've seen Canvas and various implementations of Moodle, and some of them are pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. The learning management systems are a significant issue. And not just learning management systems, but all of these like core function systems that we use, whether it be HR systems, whether it be finance systems. And so that's why it's important as an organization, the colleges should come together and use their dollars to make more accessible content. I mean, telling these vendors, we will not purchase it unless it's accessible. And so actually, I think last week, an organization called Disability In, their new chief accessibility officer came from Fidelity Investments. And for the last couple of years, he had been working with many of the largest companies in the, in the country to be able to say, look, we need to come together and we need to create a program called Procure Access. So our procurement processes now will include accessibility. We will not purchase anything that's not accessible. And put the pressure on, the blackboards and put it on the, the canvases and say, we need this. And we can't just have a plugin that's going to make our document accessible, but actually make the entire process and system accessible. But, I'll use the example of Fidelity Investment. Microsoft.
One last quick point.
Yeah, please.
It's amazing that NC State has a office which deals with that problem, because as a faculty member outside of this environment, you are left on your own to figure this mess out.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of that is part of that issue. You feel it's a very alone feeling for the instructors and for the students. And luckily there's resources here at NC State that can help bridge that gap. But it goes back to using, like I said, Microsoft using their strength to make sure that Fidelity is accessible. And same thing, NC State and other universities who have that buying power need to be able to leverage it to make sure that that you don't feel alone.
Okay, let's give it up.
Thank you.
How about one more round of applause for John? John, thank you so much for your moving presentation. For those of you who are interested in learning more about John's journey, he has a new book coming out in November. The title is Don't Ask the Blind Guy for Directions, a 30,000-mile journey for love, confidence, and a sense of belonging. And I'll share just a brief description. He didn't know I was doing this. From traveling the world and hiking mountains to finding love and raising a family, Don't Ask the Blind Guy for Directions shares John's inspirational journey against his inevitable blindness as he searched for acceptance. A powerful story for both professionals with disabilities and individuals working to create an inclusive culture at any organization. This memoir will empower you to accept yourself and others, break down barriers, and build a world where everyone belongs.